Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our quiet morning. You may be listening to this on Saturday morning, or you may be doing it at another time, and that is one of the perks of us being online. So wherever you are and whenever you're listening to this, welcome. A somewhat different way to do our quiet morning, but nevertheless, the invitation stands to draw aside and to spend time in silence with yourself and with our beloved Lord. Please feel free to pause the video at any time and take the time you need to pray and reflect, or even to re-listen to anything you would like to. Please also remember that if you would like to engage with the reflections on the handout, they're available on the St.Luke's website and have also been sent out via WhatsApp and email. There will be no official ending to the quiet morning as we would normally do, no Eucharist as such. So please end off for yourself appropriately. Perhaps you'd like to share a love meal with God or a cup of coffee with God to end. Enjoy this space and time. Be creative, journal, do some art, sit in the sun outside or in a space in your home where the sun shines in. You may even like to take more time and walk a bit, praying and reflecting on some of the material. This is your space and time with God, to allow yourself to connect with God and to allow God to fill your space with a very real sense of divine love and presence. So let us take a few minutes now to quieten ourselves down as we gently become still in the presence of God. So this morning we pause. We pause in the eye perhaps of the storm. Maybe there's a storm around us, or perhaps it's a personal storm, but we become still. We become aware of our breathing, reminding ourselves that it is God who breathes within us. And we remember who God is, the one who holds us, the one who anchors us, the one who holds all of creation. We become aware of God's presence. And in the stillness, we allow God's presence to soak into us, to strengthen us, and to console us. As you gently sit in the silence, I am going to read a prayer poem by Edwina Gately, and then we will sit in the silence for a couple of minutes. Let your God love you. Be silent. Be still. Alone. Empty before your God. Say nothing. Ask nothing. Be silent. Be still. Let your God look upon you. That is all. God knows. God understands. God loves you with an enormous love and only wants to look upon you with that love. Quiet, still, Be. Let your God love you. Allow yourself to just gently come out of the silent space when you are ready, as we play an instrumental piece of music. Our theme this morning is hope in the darkness. Hope in the darkness. I am sure we are all in some way feeling as if we are groping our way in the darkness at this stage. What a long and difficult 16 months or so this has been for us here in South Africa and generally within the world. I think darkness is often not just a physical thing, but also maybe emotional, societal, psychological, and spiritual. Here in this country, we seem to be dealing with the darkness of corruption, politicking, loss of values, collapse of so many infrastructures, the darkness of poverty, of want, inequality, and the darkness of COVID, ill health, loss, and grief. Along with all of that comes the emotional, psychological, and spiritual spin-off. The sadness and overwhelming grief, the fatigue of continually dealing with everything and facing it all, the depression and the anxiety, anger at times at the ineptitude and lack of care and concern of those supposedly in control. Fear, and at times a sense of dryness, barrenness, emptiness, aloneness. Hardened hearts, blinded eyes and deafened ears to the presence and love of God. We really feel as if we are in the darkness. And the question comes in many and varied ways of, where are you, God? Do you even care at all? Have you abandoned us? How do we see and know the hope in this darkness? I wondered this morning if we could perhaps think of what happens in the darkness. Darkness is so necessary at times. It has been said that if it wasn't for darkness, we would not know light. I think all of us have at times watched for the sunrise. We have such beautiful sunrises here in South Africa. And perhaps we've been away journeying. Or maybe we were waiting, anxiously waiting perhaps, for the dawning of a new day. But the sunrise and the gradual lightening of the darkness, as the sun spreads its splendor over the world, is so beautiful, and somehow brings with it the sense of newness and hope. Perhaps we've also had at times to walk in the darkness for some reason, and just a pinprick of light is so helpful for us. I recall my very last morning of walking on the Camino into Santiago. And I had got up very early because the Mass was going to be at 11 a.m. in the main cathedral. And I walked through the little town I was staying in quite happily, and it was still dark, but the street lights were all on, and it was fine. I had a torch. As I turned off onto the little pathway, which was meandering through the forest, I realized my torch was completely inadequate to light the way. I'd left, I couldn't get back into my accommodation, so I sort of stood at the opening thinking, what am I going to do? And at that moment, a tall man with a big black cloak on and a gorgeous torch arrived. And he looked at me and he said, good morning. And he said, just follow me. And I followed. And it was wonderful. I followed as the sun began to rise. And I followed through that darkness of undergrowth and trees and birds beginning and not knowing where I was going. And this man didn't talk much. And when we got to the first cafe, which was about an hour and a half down the road, he said, I'm going to leave you now. And he disappeared. I always think of him as my angel for that last morning, to bring me the hope and the light. We know also that darkness is necessary for transformation and growth. Think about the gestation of a baby in the darkness of the womb. Think of a caterpillar munching away greedily, and then the darkness of the cocoon, as it is gradually transformed into a butterfly, and the struggle of the butterfly to free itself from the darkness of the cocoon. Another example in nature is what happens to coal over many, many years. Coal is dirty, dull, and black. But when it is buried for a long time and subjected to large amounts of heat and pressure, its transformed transformed into the most beautiful, really hardy, sturdy diamonds. Another example is that of plants, where seeds are dropped into the ground and buried in the darkness to gradually grow and be transformed into amazing plants. Think of the winter bulbs we plant and the beautiful flowers that come in spring. Unless a kernel of wheat, it says in John 12:24, falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Darkness is necessary. Over many years, I have read, pondered, and prayed with the story of Job. It is such a story of heartache, grief, and loss. Such darkness for Job. He basically loses everything that is dear to him. His house, his children, his servants, his livestock. And then he lands up being ill with a plague of sores and loses his health. He sits on an ash heap, and his friends come along one by one, and they are not helpful at all, and are convinced that he is somewhere, somehow, been leading a life of sin and needs to repent of that. His wife suggests that perhaps he should just blaspheme and blame God. However, Job holds firmly to his belief in God, the God who loves him. And ultimately, in chapter 19, he is able to say with such conviction, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes. I, not another. How my heart yearns within me. This becomes his focus after all that he has gone through. His focus has gradually become transformed. And his yearning is to see God. How my heart yearns within me. This, maybe, is his hope. This is surrender to the darkness. This is transformation. This is holding the hope in the midst of all. We know that God is with us. He is the presence with us that never leaves us. He is our hope. We're reminded in Deuteronomy 33, verse 27, that the eternal God is my refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Another version says, the eternal God is my dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. This is such an amazing picture. We can hide in God. We can dwell in him. And we know also that we can never fall. We can never fall too far. Never fall from God's everlasting arms. In Psalm 91, it talks about us sheltering under his wings. It is like a never-ending encircling. We are held. We are journeyed with. We are watched over. All is shared with the God who loves us beyond all we can ever imagine. In him we live and move and have our being. We need to abide with him, and he abides with us. Christ in us is our hope of glory. We do not know what will befall us or what we will go through, but we do know that wherever we travel in the darkness, our God is there in us and with us. Christ in us, the hope of glory. There is our hope. In the darkness, we are transformed and made more and more into God's image, in spite of ourselves, until we reflect God's glory as we live in God. Rainer Maria Rilke, a monk, in his Book of Hours, Love Poems to God, put it this way: I yearn to be held in the great hands of your heart. Oh, let them take me now. Into them I place these fragments, my life. And you, God, spend them however you want. I'm going to repeat that. I yearn to be held in the great hands of your heart. Oh, let them take me now. Into them I place these fragments, my life. And you, God, spend them however you want. Let us end by listening to a song together. Have a wonderful time of communion and connection with this God who loves you way beyond your wildest imaginings.
We don't know where the storm is going to break, but underneath all things, the everlasting arms. We don't know how much more our hearts can take, but underneath all things, the everlasting arms. Underneath all things are the everlasting arms. Underneath all things, the everlasting arms of grace. Underneath all things are the everlasting arms. Underneath it all is love. We don't know where this fiery trial will pass, but underneath all things, the everlasting arms. We don't know how long this pain will last. Underneath all things, the everlasting arms. Underneath all things are the everlasting arms. Underneath all things, the everlasting was over. Just when I felt like love was gone, underneath all things are the everlasting arms. Underneath all things, the everlasting arms of grace. Underneath all things are the everlasting